This is Zoro's 100 million berry sword, and its attack power will blow your mind. We're also gonna show you how he's owned a national treasure and a blade so deadly it sends shivers down pirate spines, and so much more. So we're counting down the stupidly expensive things Zoro owns, because the road to the world's greatest swordsman doesn't come cheap. As usual, we'll have a look at each item's cost in berries and in US dollars. So let's dive in. Number 6. First, we'll talk about some of the earliest swords of Zoro's. These blades were the very first ones that kicked off his adventure into the world of One Piece. These katanas were his first real weapons, and they're an important part of his journey to becoming a swordsman. Shimotsuki Kozaburo, a famous swordsmith in Zoro's village, recognized his potential early on and gave him these twin katanas when Zoro was still training at the dojo. He must have seen something in him because honestly, giving a kid 2 real swords isn't exactly the safest choice. Now while these were not supreme grade or great blades or anything fancy for that matter, they carried enormous sentimental value for Zoro. They were not just some random blades. They were the ones that taught him how to slice through his first practice targets. And let's not forget, these were the training wheels that led him to his famous 3-sword style. Unfortunately for them, they didn't make it out of Zoro's journey unscathed. During his battle with the world's strongest swordsman, Dracula Mihawk, they were completely shattered. However, he did have a good amount of use with them before they met their end. So the question is, what's the value of these swords? So far, we know that a low-quality sword is 50,000 berries, while a high-quality one is 100,000. Looking at who gifted him the swords, it is safe to presume that each katana would cost at least 100,000 berries, making the total 200,000 berries for both of them. In the real world, that's gonna be 2,150 US dollars for both blades. Oh, and before I forget to mention, we'll be using the exchange rate of 93 berries for $1. So after Zoro's humble beginnings with these katanas, you'd think he'd keep it safe with his next choice of swords, right? Well, not quite. What I mean by that is this next blade is considered a cursed blade. Number 5. Meet Sandai Kitetsu. This is a sword that is known to bring a horrible death to all of its owners. Now most pirates would probably steer clear of a weapon once they hear that, but Zoro on the other hand looked at it and went, challenge accepted. The story behind Sandai Kitetsu is simple. Zoro walked into a shop, found his cursed blade, and instead of ditching it as any sane person would, he threw it into the air to see if it would chop his arm off. When the sword didn't cut him, Zoro took it as a sign that they were destined to be BFFs. Despite its cursed nature, Sandai Kitetsu is a sharp addition to Zoro's collection. Sure, it might bring a bit of bad luck, but in his hands it becomes just another tool of destruction. If anything, the curse is probably more afraid of Zoro. But how about its value? Let's just say that cursed swords don't come cheap. This one currently rests at a price of at least 1 million berries, or we could say $10,700. However, with Zoro's reckless confidence, this sword is in good hands. For now. After testing his luck with Sandai Kitetsu and surviving a potential curse, Zoro managed to add another beautiful sword to his collection. Thankfully, it's not cursed this time. Number 4. Up next is a blade with both elegance and power, Yubashiri. This sword was considered a meta blade and was among the 50 skillful greatswords. After Zoro recklessly proved his loyalty to Sandai Kitetsu, Ippon Matsu, the shop owner, decided to give him Yubashiri for free. Well, you know what they say, you can't have too many swords. Now Yubashiri was a bit different from all the other swords Zoro had used so far. It's known for being lightweight, durable, and incredibly graceful. Despite its lightweight, it still had the sharpness to easily slice a sea-trained carriage. This was probably one of the most elegant swords Zoro has ever owned, until it met its unfortunate end. During the Enies Lobby arc, Yubashiri was tragically rusted to pieces by a marine captain named Shu. Even with how graceful the sword is, how it went out was not. But despite the sword's lightweight, it still carried some serious weight in terms of value. Well, its price wasn't exactly stated, but looking at the 2-for-1 deal Zoro scored with this sword, the fact it won't try to harm its owner and it ranking higher than Sandai Katetsu, it is safe to approximate that this sword would cost somewhere around 5 million berries for anyone looking to acquire it. And of course, that would translate to somewhere around $53,000. After losing Yubashiri to a rusty situation, Zoro wasn't too happy with losing one of his prized swords. But don't worry, he's got a blade that's been with him since his early days. Number 3. Coming up at number 3, we've got Wado Ichimonji. It's the sword that bears more than just sharpness. Wado Ichimonji isn't just among the 21 great swords. It is also the sword that belonged to his childhood friend Kuina. This blade represents his promise to her, the one he made that he would become the world's greatest swordsman. So, you remember Shimotsuki Kozaburo? The man who gifted young Zoro a couple of swords. Yeah, it turns out he's the master swordsmith behind this fine blade and Kuina's grandfather. As one of the 21 great blades, Wado Ichimonji is incredibly powerful. In fact, it's the only sword that made it out alive when Zoro battled Mihawk. Despite its strength, this sword is a connection to his past, a reminder of his promise to Kuina, and a driving force behind his ambition. Wherever Zoro goes, this sword follows him. As for its value, this sword is of immense sentimental value to Zoro, and he will hold on to it until the end of his journey. But as for its cost, it's been revealed that this sword costs 10 million berries or $107,000 and even more. Well, that's if you could convince Zoro to part with it. Spoiler, you can't. So we've seen that Wado Ichimonji holds Zoro's promise. However, the next sword on our list gave him a taste of true legendary power. Number 2. In second place rests Shisui, one of the most powerful swords Zoro has used. It doesn't just carry raw strength, it's got a whole nation's history behind it. Shisui is another one of the 21 great swords and was originally wielded by the legendary samurai Ryuma. I mean, he was so strong that his sword was preserved by Wano country. Now, how did Zoro get his hands on such a priceless sword? Well, back in Thriller Bark, he fought a zombie version of Ryuma and won. Since Zoro is not one to turn down a good blade, he walked away with Shisui, casually wielding a national treasure. However, Shisui is not just any ordinary blade. It's a black blade, one of the only two we've seen in One Piece so far. Along with having maximum style points, a black blade pretty much means that it has reached max level after going through countless battles, making it pretty powerful and impossible to break. With Shisui, Zoro was able to take his swordsmanship to the next level using its immense weight and magnified destructive power. Of course, Shisui's journey with Zoro came to a close when he returned it to Wano, where it rightfully belonged. But let's talk about how valuable Shisui really is. We're not just talking about a legendary sword here, it's a priceless artifact to the people of Wano. On top of that, it's a rare black blade, so if it were ever sold, it would be worth around 50 million berries. Maybe even more. This would mean that this sword would casually sit around more than $500,000 at $537,000. After all, this sword is so valuable that its return caused a major political event in Wano. After wielding a national treasure, you'd think Zoro had reached the peak of swordsmanship, right? Well, think again, because up next, we're talking about a blade so powerful that it pushes the wielder to the limits just by being drawn. Number 1. Now at the top of the stockpile is the legendary sword Enma. Just like the other two we've seen, this sword is a great blade. And if that isn't impressive enough, it used to belong to the fabled samurai Kozuki Yoden. What makes Enma terrifyingly unique? Well, unlike most swords that you just swing around, Enma has a mind of its own. It actively draws out more haki than its wielder intends to use. With this fact, this sword is pretty difficult to handle. Even Zoro had a bit of an issue trying to control it. And if someone like him gets a tough time from a sword, you know it's a fearful one. Just like Wado Ichimonji, Enma is also crafted by Shimotsuki Kozaburo. However, this second sword is his magnum opus. He even considers it one of the strongest swords in the world, and for good reason. This sword has performed numerous feats like cutting the tip of an island when Zoro wanted to cut a tree, all the way to even cutting a yonko like Kaido. Keep in mind that this is someone who is considered invulnerable to most attacks. Out of all the swords here, this one holds the most potential. According to Kazuki Sukiyaki, this is the sword that Zoro can turn into a black blade. Not only that, this will officially promote it to the ranks of a supreme great sword. Now, how much Enma is worth? Well, considering it's one of the great swords and has infinite potential to become much better, this sword's value could rise all the way to 100 million berries and beyond. That's a whopping value of $1,075,000 US right there. But for Zoro, this sword will always be the thing that will keep pushing him to the next level of swordsmanship. And there you have it, Zoro's cutting-edge hoard of valuables. You might be curious how we got our exchange rate or what kind of expensive things Nami owns. Click the video on your screen now to get the answers. And with that, thanks for sticking through and see you all in the next video.